Everyone. In this video, we'll get started with our Python application. First thing first, let's clear this main.py file. This is going to be the point of entry of application, and we will not be configuring any API routes here. So I will go ahead and remove it. And before we organize our directory, I'll just show you a diagram of the hexagonal architecture and the principles that we want to follow. Now, in principle, we have only two layers, let's say. We'll have the application layer. It has our application services, and we also have the domain layer that has the core business rules that we want to apply to our product. Now, more specifically, in our FastAPI application, we're going to have the application layer, which is going to do the repository. It's going to use repositories to read and write data in our database. And it's going to help the domain layer to also enforce some rules. Also, in the hexagonal architecture, we have the primary and driving adapters and the secondary adapters. The primary adapters, it could be any point of entry of our application. For example, it could be SOAP or REST, or it could be an admin view or controllers or console commands. For our application, it's going to be from HTTP requests. And the way that you want to organize your application layer is that everyone who sends you this data from these driving adapters, they will have to send you the same DTO so that your application layer can process it and then do what you need to do. Now, in what we want, the way that we want to think about this architecture, it's like I think an easier example would be this. So think about that this is your application, and these are the adapters that you want to use, repositories or primary adapters from HTTP request, right? You want your application layer to be like, okay, look, this is gonna be, this is what you need to plug in. So you need to have these two, vertical stuff and this dot. And all you need to do to provide is just this, which is usually the end of the cable of an electrical appliance, right? So regardless whether you're plugging your mobile phone, your desktop, or I don't know, a hairdryer, our application doesn't care, right? The only thing that we care is that as long as the primary adapter implements this interface, that is, sends the correct payload to application layer, our application can serve this customer, right? So you can think of it in this way. And the same goes for the secondary adapters, right? We say, look, our application, we can plug in multiple secondary adapters to application as long as they implement this interface again, right? So if we were to remove a repository and for any reason we want to change it, we say, okay, look, as long as your new repository implements these methods, it's good enough for me to use. So we can avoid going to all these different places and change it. Because let's say you want to start with writing raw SQL queries and you want to change it to SQL Alchemy ORM. If you use queries, let's say, in your endpoints in different services, it's gonna be almost impossible to rewrite. It's gonna be very hard to do that. Now, let's get started. So I have removed these API routes here, and I'm gonna create some new folders, and I'll explain you which one. What is it? The first folder that I'm going to create is the API folder. That this is going to be like the primary adapter, which is under the presentation layer. And here I'm going to add the API v1, which if you have an API, usually you want to have different versions from it. Now, I will just start it with v1 for me. And I will also add a middleware here. Okay, I will not add a middleware, but if we were to add a middleware, you could add here middlewares. Middlewares are functions that you want to run before HTTP request. So for example, let's say you have protected routes and you want to check if the user send authentication token and you want to decode it to know in your application service who is that user. So we have the v1, here I'm going to add the endpoints, which here we're going to add our routers, we're going to add the schemas, which here we're going to add our pydantic schemas that define what type of payload should someone send to our service to work. Sorry, when someone is using our HTTP, what they need to send to HTTP to accept it or reject it, and then forward it to the application layer. And we are going to also add the dependencies, which here we are going to have the dependencies for our endpoints, and we're going to use the FastAPI dependency injection system. And the last one, it's going to be the mappers, which the mappers are going to help us translate these pydantic models that we'll be using for schemas to application DTO. Now, the reason that we do that is that we don't want to mix our endpoints, what they are using, with the application layer. We want them to be completely independent. Okay, so now that I have explained what all these folders are, let's go ahead and create our first router. So endpoints, I'm gonna add, let's say, let's call this public. Actually, how do I name it? Okay, let's call this protected router. Or okay, to-do router, and we'll see to-do router.py. And what I need to do is from FastAPI import API router. I'm going to also import the status object. And I'm going to say router equals API router. Add router.post. And here I'm going to create our first to-do. So this is going to be for the CRUD operations, and this is going to be for the create. Now the response model, I will leave it empty for now, and I will set the status codes to status HTTP 201 created. And here I'm going to type the async def create to do. And I'm going to hit pass because I don't want to implement it right now. What's the problem with this? This is not needed. And I'm going to copy it. Here I'm going to do it. So we have create, get, and this is going to be to do ID. This is going to be get, can do it like all. And here I'm going to put get, post, put, and delete. And here I'm going to add also to do ID. We don't want that. Actually, this has to be no content, because when you delete stuff, there is no response. And for the rest ones, we don't care. Yeah, we're going to use the default one, which is the 200. So we have defined the create to do, get to do by ID, get all, put, which again is going to be to do ID, and delete, which again is going to be based on the to do ID. Now, one thing, because I have defined this dynamic route. So in general, let's say you want to create a dynamic route segment for the router. We can add this as a dynamic parameter. So let's say we had 5 different to-dos. We wouldn't be having, let's say, to do 1 or to do 2 or 3 and 4 or 5. We would never do that. So we can do it, we can make our endpoints accept a dynamic parameter, which is going to be from the to-do ID. One thing to note is that because we have defined this first, everything is going to be associated with a dynamic route. So if I were to use all now, it's going to be associated with this because this will be the dynamic route segment. But what we can do, we can just move this up here. So if we use the all/all, it's going to map to this, and the rest is going to be associated with this one. So only in this scenario, the order matters. Okay, so we have this. And what we need to do now, we need to just go back to our application and register this router. So here I'm going to say app dot include router, and here I'm going to just remove this, import the router that we have created. What I would like to do, I would like to avoid register all the API routers here. So we can just register them here on a base router. And we can register everything here, and we can just import the base router here. So this from FastAPI import API router. Here we can say to do protected, let's say, because we can make it like public and non-public routes. So let's do protected router equals API router. We can prefix this with v1 API/v1. So all of our endpoints will be prefixed with this. And I'm going to say protected router dot include router. And I'm going to import the router that I just created. So from dot to do router, import to do. It should be router as to do router. And I'll just include that. And I will just repeat the same thing for the main.py. Also, a good way to export modules, let's say, from your Python packages is to just add the init file. So let's say I want to import from API in other major components to application. There is no need for me to just find the exact file. I can just do the following. I can just add init.py. And I can just import here all the modules that I want to export from API. So I can say that from .v1 endpoints dot base router import from base router protected router, and I can just explicitly define here what this module should be exporting. So I can just say protected router, and if I go back to my main, I can say from core.api import protected router, or okay, that's correct, that's protected router, add include router. And if we go back to localhost, we should be able to see the routes. I think it's 8,000/docs. Actually, let's see if it works. Oh, we didn't start the application. Okay, so our application is working. Okay, it doesn't found. It's correct because we haven't defined the default route. And here, if you go in FastAPI types /docs, you can see this interface that shows you your endpoints and what each endpoint does. So as you can see, all our endpoints are prefixed with API v1. And this is the CRUD operation that we want to do. CRUD means create, read, update, delete. And this is the function name that we have defined. So because I copy paste everything, you can see that everything is like create to do. So here we can name it like get all to do's, get to do, update to do, and delete to do. And if we control R, we can see these changes here. Now, also in FastAPI, if you add a comment just below the function definition, your comment will be also added to the Swagger, so you can read the purpose of this endpoint. So create a new to do for a user. And if we go back and we load, we're gonna see the comment that we added here. So we've created these endpoints, and also you can see that for dynamic. Okay, so this is not our dynamic segment does not work because we also need to add it to the function definition. And I'll show you how to do that right now. Okay, so we have created our functions. We have set the method that what we want to do, and we also added the status code. Now, for each endpoint, we require different schemas. Schemas essentially is what type of data does our endpoint require to work. So here we can go to schemas, can add it to do schemas.py. Okay. And for this, we need to install a new package, which is going to be the pydantic, just pydantic. And here we should see it on installation, pip install pydantic. Again, our virtual environment activated. Let's just install the package. Okay, it probably got installed with FastAPI. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to say from pydantic import base model. And here I need to add what type of data do I need for my to-do. Now, okay, let's get our first schema, and I'll explain you a way that I like to do, define my schemas. So I'm gonna say class create to do base model, and here we can define the, I don't know, let's say the title. It's gonna be a string, and it's gonna be some input field dot means it makes this field required. So if you add this, it means that this field is required, and you can say that it should have a min length of 5 characters and max length of, I don't know, 50 characters. Now we have added the title. We can also add the description, and we can do this to 255, and let's leave it 10. Now, for every, let's say, endpoint, we need a separate schema. It could also be the same schema, but sometimes it's kind of impossible to have. And I'll explain you briefly. I'll show you now. And let's say I also want to create a to-do response schema. Base model. And let's say we need again both the title and description, and this time we can also add, I don't know, like a created at field, for example. Okay, let me just double check something. Okay. So let's say we want to have the created at so that we let the user know when this was created. So this could be datetime or none, and equals none. From datetime import datetime. Okay, so here we say that this field could be a datetime object or it could be none. And we can also do this for the update that. Update at. And let's say that for our, okay, let's also add one more thing here. Let's call it, I don't know, something that, okay, and for the response schema, we also have the ID, right? Because we're going to be adding this. For now, we'll just add it as a string. Now, the problem is that, let's say we want to modify the title and description. It doesn't really, it's not going to be useful for us to work with. Update to do. Let's say if I were to define my models like this, every time that I wanted to change the title or the description, I had to make sure that all of these were in sync, and that would be like pretty annoying and definitely would not work for a bigger application. So usually what I like to do is create a base class for my to-do. So for me, it's going to be like a create, not a create to-do, it's going to be like a to-do base schema. And my update to-do, it's going to inherit from this base schema. So it's going to be update to-do schema. Here I'm going to add the create to-do schema. And this is going to be the to-do response schema. Now, because we just update, so when we update, we also want to know the ID, right? So here we can just put the ID field. And for our response, it's going to be for our to-do response schema. It could be something like this. So to-do base schema, and we want the ID, the created that, and the updated that. And maybe when we get all the to-do items, we'll probably display them as a list. So we don't really care about the created that and the updated that fields. And we'll probably just need a title. So we can do it like this, base schema, and just add the title. There's probably a better way to do it, but I really don't want to bother myself with it. And I'll just remove the validation because this is going to be returned from the service. So it's impossible to be, incorrect. So to do a response, so it's gonna be list item to do response schema or to do list item. It's better like this, right? So I'm gonna use these schemas that we have created right now to our router, and we'll see what will happen if we try to send the incorrect payload. Also for the update, I'm gonna just pass because it's impossible for because all the parameters like put, it's gonna be added in the URL. So I'm gonna add a pass here. And I would advise to explicitly create this update to do schemas, inherit, and just don't extend it. Don't try to add an update or a create. It's gonna be a little bit confusing, right? Because you want to update the resource, and you say that the schema is create. So it's gonna be a little bit confusing. Now let's go back to sample router. Just go back. I'm just having some notes for me on the side because I don't remember all the syntax. So let's go here. Okay. So for the to-do, I'm gonna add the schema, and I'm gonna just repeat this everywhere. And I'm gonna add the correct schema right now. So I'm gonna do, so here it's the schema. So I can do from dot schemas dot to do schemas import. And because I will be importing a lot of schemas right now, I'll just use this parenthesis so that I can easily break into a new line without having 1 kilometer of imports here. So I can do to do, not to do basic schemas with that one tab. We have the create to do, update to do response schema, and the to do list item response schema. Now, in the FastAPI router, you can also add the response model, which it's gonna automatically map the values from the response you're returning from the service to the response of the HTTP request. So, for example, let's say for the create to do, you return, I don't know, deleted that, because let's say we're working with a soft deletion. If your application service for some reason accidentally sends and deleted that field in the response model, when you define the response model here, it's going to automatically remove it, and it will also do a validation of, let's say, ID should be in the item and you don't return the ID from the application layer, it's going to throw you an exception. So it's a good way to validate what are we sending back to the user. So here I'm going to create to-do schema. Here it's going to be a list of to-do list item response schema. Then get, it's going to be wait a minute. No, that's wrong. Actually, I mixed topics right now. Okay, so this is gonna be what we need for the endpoint. Okay, so this is gonna be the to do, not to do. Doesn't actually, no, we don't need a payload here. We're gonna just get the ID. For the update, we're gonna do the update to do schema. And for the delete, we don't need a payload. We just need the ID from our endpoint. So to read a resource and delete, we don't need a payload. Also, want to keep in mind is that for get requests do not have a payload. So if for any reason you want to fetch a resource, but you need to attach something on the body of your request, you will have to convert it to a post request. So this here define what does our application needs, and I'll just show you how it works from the Swagger. So let's restart it, and you see that it automatically gave us a sample field, a sample payload, sorry. So let's say we want to send a title of 1 string, right? We have already set the validation, no, it should be 5. So it's gonna say string too short, string should be at least 5 characters. So if I were to execute, it sends null because, as you can also see the response, it's 201. And you can see the body, it's null because we don't return anything. And what I also want to do at this point, I also want to define what each endpoint should return. So for me here, I'm gonna add response model. And here is gonna be the to-do response schema, and this is gonna be for all my endpoints except the get all. So I'll just click here and like this. Now again, these are getting a little bit bigger, so I'll just break them into new line so that it looks a little bit better. So just like this and like this. Okay, and only for this endpoint, it's gonna be the list. So response model, it's gonna be a list of this model. Now, if I try to use the same endpoint again, this time I'm gonna get an error. Status field must not have responsibility. Okay, actually that's correct. Yeah, it's correct. So as I mentioned previously, there's no content for delete resource, so there's not gonna be a response model there. So let's see if get a 500 error that says okay, I know that that's a problem, it's a serialization error, but validation error, input should be a valid dictionary or object to extract fields. Okay, because it is null, that's why. So if I were to return something different, let's say ID1, now it's gonna give me a different error message. Now it says you should be returning a dictionary, but it's not. And here again it says not a valid. Okay. So it should be here. Now I should get the error message that I'm not sending the correct fields. So you see, now it says that you need to have the title and description, as well as the ID. Okay, so now we have explained, what are endpoints, or these are like points of entries for application. It's gonna be like the URL that you're gonna put in the browser. You can also see the HTTP request here. So if someone uses this URL, you'll have to also send this body. You can also run it from a Git bash CLI. It's still gonna work. We have defined whether it's a response model for the API router. It's like what fields our model needs to return and what's gonna be the status code. We need to define the function, and we can also add a comment that is going to be visible on our Swagger API. Okay, now we have defined this. What we need to do now, we can define the dependency injection class for our application service. If it has external dependencies, I'll just add the dependency right now. It will not have any dependency, but I'll just add it to show you how it looks like. So here I can create the to-do dependency. Okay, for this to work, I also need to create a dummy class. So I'll just go back to the core application. Here I can add services. Oops, services. And I can say to-do service. To-do service. Class to-do service. Class. Okay, and I can go back to dependency and say from core.application.services.todo service import to-do service. And I'm going to type here get to-do service return to-do service. Actually, okay, I'll just pass a parameter to show you how it's going to look like. Here we can pass it on like a text, for example. Self.text equals text. So now that we are gonna do a dependency injection, we also need to pass the text to our service. So text equals get dependency. Now we are usually we are having a dependency injection system to, let's say, we want our service to work with a specific repository, or we want to pass the logger, or we want to add multiple repositories. So we don't import them in this file and use them. We're directly injecting them to our service. So we have that, and now I'm going to use the FastAPI dependency injection system. So, okay. So from here, I'm going to say from .dependencies to dependencies import get to service. And here I'm going to just add it like this service Okay, also need to import a dependency, depends from FastAPI, depends from get to do service. Actually, it's gonna be an equal. And here I'm gonna add a dummy method, def, async def. I'll explain you what's an async function, maybe in a different video. But the idea is that we want to run our code asynchronously and not synchronously. It needs some explanation, so just think about it that I'm using just this keyword for now. Just the async. I'll explain it later. It's gonna be async def create to do. Here I'm not gonna add arguments and pass, and I have a response. When we run async, when we want to invoke an async method, we also need to use the await keyword. And asynchronous methods can only be used with an async function, so you cannot do it like this. It has to be an async. And it's gonna be the service. Fix this service. It's gonna be a service dot. Okay. The reason why this is not happening is that Python cannot understand what's the service object. So we can import our to-do service just for the notation. So it can also go from, can say from core.application.services.to service to-do service. And here we can add it like this. So previously the type of service was any, now I'm gonna say it's a to-do service. And also I'm gonna break this into a line because again it's getting out of hand. This, we have the to-do service, and I'm gonna say dot create to do, and here I'm gonna pass something. I'm gonna pass a DTO, and here I'm gonna say DTO, it's an empty object for now, and here I want to return the response. I'm gonna repeat exactly the same thing for the rest of the endpoints. So first I'm gonna create the get to do, get all to-dos, update to do, and delete to do. Okay, so we have that response. Again, I'm gonna say DTO equals empty. We need to do the dependency of this DTO. So I'm gonna paste this. Oops. Okay, let's inject the service. To do, it's gonna be like this. Okay, and it's gonna be get to do, put to do or update, delete to do. So we have delete, update, get, and we need get all to do's. Okay, great. I'm gonna remove this. Okay, good. And okay, so previously I mentioned that you have multiple point of entries, and we want them to send a unified payload to application service. Also, one thing to keep in mind for Hexagonal is that we want to avoid having dependency inject. We want our layers to be mixed. Okay, so we don't want anything from the driving adapter to be mixed in the application service and from the application service to the domain service. That's why we are not directly passing the create to-do schema to our application service. But we can do the opposite. We can go from the inner of the circle to the outside layers. So I can use domain related stuff to application service, and in the presentation layer, I can use the stuff from the application service, and that's why we can do this. So that's why I can reference my to-do service to the presentation layer. Okay, so okay, now this is done. That's good. Now, what I'm gonna do, I'll just also add the IDs to my function definitions. So previously, if I were to go to my endpoint right now, you can see that these are not dynamic parameters, but it seems like something static. So in order for this to work, we just need to pass here the to-do ID. Say it's strings, we're gonna say by default it's none. Let me just fix this and go back, and to do, it's not to do, it's to do ID. So non-DTO, we can pass that to do ID directly, and we can't do the same thing here. No, we can't, because this is an update, but we can also request the ID from the URL. Something that Python has is that if you initialize something, it has to be at the end. So it doesn't like this because this is being initialized, but if I were to do this, it's fine. I strongly advise to be consistent. So what I suggest is just initialize everything to none and just go with the ID, the schema, and then with the service. And try to keep it unified on all of your endpoints. So you have the to-do ID again, this, you have the get, so we don't need that. And have the get all, which doesn't accept anything here. And have the schema, okay, that's good. So if I reload and go back, you can see now that it accepts an ID as a dynamic parameter. Okay, so now we have the API router, we have the schemas that it requires, we have our application service, and now for us to connect our presentation layer to the application service, we need two more things. The first is we need DTOs that can be used in the application layer. And we also need a mapper that it's going to be a helper class that is going to help us translate a schema to an application DTO. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to go back, core application. Now here we can say DTOs. And here we can add the to-do DTOs. Now, DTOs are purely dummy objects. They don't have any validation rules. They don't know if, for example, the title should be at a minimum of 5 characters. They don't really much know anything. They are pretty much just plain placeholders for data. So to create just a placeholder for data, we need to import the data class from the data classes package. Class. And here I'm gonna say, let's call it data class, I don't know, like a class DT, or not DTO, to do DTO. DTO stands for data transfer object. So here we're gonna add the title. It's gonna be a string. Whoops. Description, which again is gonna be a string. We might have the create act. Okay, we could have the created at. Okay, now I'm thinking. Should our application service return an NTD or an DTO? Okay, it should return an DTO. Makes sense. Okay, so we have the title, description. So now we also have the ID, which it could be none, right? Because when we want to send our DTO from the application, when we create a new to do, it will not have an ID. So this could be empty, or if it is, it could be none. So we have the created at, which is gonna be date time, created at date time. So also need to import the from date time, import date time. So it's gonna be in date time, could be none as well. It's none. Be update that and delete that. So I'll just work with this for my application. Update that and delete that. Right, because only these two fields will definitely not be, these two fields are required actually, and for sure I'll have these two every time. So we have our to-do DTO, and now we just need to create a map pair that what it's gonna do, it's gonna help us convert our schemas to an application DTO. I'll just go ahead and see an example of a map pair again. Okay, so let's go up here and let's call these, okay, let's call these to do API mapper. I think it makes more sense to name it like this. Okay. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do that, and let's call it class to do API mapper. And we're going to have static methods. Static methods essentially help us use a class without initializing it. And we're going to do that because we just want to group a bunch of functions together. And it also, our class is going to be stateless, so we can go ahead and use a static method instead. So we can say def from create schema. I'm going to do a pass for now, and add static method from update schema. Okay, and now we just need to import, I'll just move this here, and what we need to import here is both our schemas and also the application DTO. So to schemas, import create DTO and update to schema. From create schema, so I'm gonna say DTO equals, actually it's gonna be schema like this, schema update to the schema, and from core dot, actually I think we can just do like this application. Okay, we don't need to put core. Okay, so DTO to do, import to do DTO. We're gonna say that these methods will return this type of object, and I'm gonna create my to do right now. So it's gonna be like this, return DTO, return DTO, and I'll just assign the values in here. And what is gonna be here, It's actually, you know what? We can just directly return it. No need to. Here I'm gonna say titles equals schema dot title, description equals schema dot description. For update, unfortunately, we don't have more fields. So let's say we could make the title actually to be, once you create it, you can update it to make it a more concrete example. So you can go ahead, and I'm gonna just make the assumption that you can only update the description. So I'll just go back to the schemas, and in the update to do schema, I'll just update title back. Sorry, I'll just update the description instead. So to do base schema, so this is gonna be a pass. And for the update, I'll just update title instead, and this is gonna be the base model. So we can only update the description of it to do, not the title, just to make it a more concrete example. Okay, so we have the from create, from update, so we're good to go. And now we need to just import our mapper. So I'll just also remove this core as well. It's not required. I'm gonna say from dot mappers dot to do API mapper import to do API mapper. And here I'm gonna just translate these pydantic models to placeholder classes. It's gonna be to do API mapper dot from create schema. And I'm gonna just do this for put as well for update. So I can select this, save. Okay, good. Now I'll go back to my application service and I'll just define what my service accepts. So I'm gonna import the to do DTO. Okay, so when I create a DTO, I'll just have myself, which is a reference for the class. And I'm gonna accept here the DTO, which is gonna be a to-do DTO. It's gonna return a to-do DTO. And for convenience, I can just return the DTO without implementing the repository, just to show you how it's gonna look. So I have to create DTO. Okay, now this should work. Okay, let's see. So if I go back and just hit send, it should send me back the same. Okay, it's loading. Maybe there's an exception on it. No module name application. Okay, so from core. Title follows default argument ID. Okay, because okay, I'll just have to add ID. So DTO.id equals 1. Okay, let's see. Okay, what's this? So okay, okay, so it's again the same annoying thing. So you need to put it like this. Okay, and just from core. Okay, so if we go back and okay, so you can see that's it's been created. If I now modify the response model, and let's say I want to remove the update that, right? I don't want to show the user what I have done. I can just go back, execute, and you can see that the created that and update that fields are not there anymore. So it's a good way to just make sure what you're supposed to send back to the user. Okay, good. So we have that. response. We'll have to do the same thing for the to-do, for the update to-do. Now, the only difference is that now I'll just have to also pass the ID. So this is going to be the DTO, no, here, get all put here. Okay, so it's already from here, and I'm going to say dton.id equals to-do ID. Can just assign it here. Okay, perfect. Now let's go back to application service, and I'll just say here what I need to have. So for get to do, update to do, and delete to do, it's going to be self and the to do ID. You can add ID as well, like this, but we can be more explicit of what's ID here, right? Okay, it's a bit, it makes sense that, it's get to do, we have the ID, but we need to be more explicit because maybe we want to fetch the get to do's by user ID or get all to do's by user ID or whatever. So try to always be more explicit and show intention with your code to make it more readable. So get to do, it's going to be the DTO, get all to do's. Here it's going to be a list. Update to do, it's going to be this. And here you can also add none. You can leave it empty because all functions by default are none. So if you hover over the delete to do method, it's going to show you that it's none, but you can try to be more explicit or you can just leave it blank, whatever you think is best for you. Okay, so just a quick recap of what we have done so far, because I think I've shown you a lot. Let's go back. I'll just show you the diagram again. So it's here. Okay, so just a quick recap of how our code reflects to this diagram. We have created our primary adapters, which is the API routers v1 that we have created, which is this one. It's this one, API v1 endpoints. So this is our driving adapter, and we have defined the endpoint. So what URL the user needs to use. We have defined what type of data our router should return. We have, and also the status code of the operation that they want to do. The operations, the status codes are in general industry standards. So you create a resource, it's going to be 201. If it's okay, it's going to be 200. If there's no response body, like a delete action, it's going to be no content. We have also, just fix that one like that. Okay. We have defined what type of data that we want to accept with our pydantic schemas. And we have also created some mappers to translate them to application DTOs, because again, we don't want to mix our pydantic models that exist here to our application service we use here. Our dependencies should only go outwards, not inwards. So we have created our mapper that is going to help us translate these pydantic schemas to placeholder classes that they have no idea what the purpose of the data are. The only thing that they care is the attributes. So if I were to have a validation for the ID, description of title, then application DTO is not responsible for that. The only thing is its only responsibility is to just transfer data from the presentation layer to the application layer. If I were to add a new, let's say, a driving adapter, I would create a new mapper or use this mapper here. That it would help me to translate, I don't know, XML to again for application DTO. We have also created a dependency injection system for our classes. What this says, it simply says what type of dependencies our class need. This has to be dynamic. We don't want our class to just work with a specific repository. For some reason, we might change that. Also, previously I added this text. I never used it, so I'll show you now that our dependency has worked. So I'll just go ahead and fake it that I have created a new to-do. So I'll just click here, again, create it. If I go here, you can see this is the string that we added from our dependency injection. What else? Okay, I think that's it for now. I think it's a huge lesson. In the next video, what I'd like to do is create the repository interfaces for the application layer. I'm also going to inject here my to-do repository, and I also implement the repository, the to-do repository to show you how to save your data in database. And naturally, I'll show you how to actually, you know what? I'll just leave it for 2 videos for now. In the next video, I'll show you how to create the environment file, create again a base model with pydantic to configure your application settings. We will configure the infrastructure for the database, and I'll probably add the to-do model and use Alembic to run the migration. Okay, that's it. Thank you. See you in the next one.